kind of an interesting little bit. Notice I've got a self-referencing arrow here because nodes point to other nodes, right? So we just have a little self-referencing each node has a other node, right? So, but really in terms of the simplicity, you've got the list class, you've got the node class. Now, how do you mark that thing if you really want to indicate that it is internal? The only way to do it is to hint. So I could do something like this, right? I could put minus in front of it, and since that's private, that's kind of a hint to the reader. Or I could do this. That's kind of a Java specific weirdness, but you could do that in the marking for the node class. And that would be another indication, because you can't have a public standalone static class. You can't have a private class that just sits there, right? Neither of those things makes any sense. So those kinds of things, especially I think the minus is kind of a clue that even though we have to draw the box outside, it's really inside the linked list class, right? It's private to that. And if you really wanted to, you could also put just a little note, one of those little UML, or one of those, the little note things, and you could say that, but I think it's clear enough if you put a minus in front of it, right? So that's really not interesting in terms of the class diagram. That's really straightforward. In terms of the linked list, we've already seen things that look like this. So for a plain linked list, here you have your linked list, and it's all of student type. It points to nodes of student type, which point to other nodes of student type. Each one of those are pointing to the data references are pointing to students. Right? So that's the way you would make an object diagram of the linked list. Okay? So if anybody tells you that in the world you'll never use an object diagram, it ain't really true, because when people draw pictures of linked lists, what do you think they're drawing? This, right? That's what they're drawing, right? They're drawing an object diagram, whether they want to call it that or not. Okay? So that's a linked list object diagram. What about circular linked lists? This is a big hint for you, folks. The first node, right? The first node points to itself, because circular means circular, right? Circular means you've got to be able to go to the next node. And if you don't start out this way, you have to have special case code when you add the next one. This way, you don't have to have special code, right? If you want to add at the end, you go to the end and then you change the next pointer and it's all ready to go for you. It's not a special case. So if the list is empty, of course, front is null. But if you have only one item, right, one element, its next pointer points to itself. That sets up the proper setup so that any future code doesn't have to special case it. Okay, so that's unusual, but that's the way it works. If we wanted to draw an object diagram of that, we could have this case where the node here, the next here, points back to the first node, right? So that would be one way to diagram this. Another way to diagram it, this is probably more proper because of the direction, right? But another way you could do it is you actually diagram them in a circle, right? So I have my list, here's the front, it points to this node, then here's next, so here we go around the circle, around the circle, around the circle, around the circle, right? So that could be another way, although that kind of breaks the typical flow of an object diagram. That would be one way to conceive of it if you want, right? Now, maybe you have an end reference. I think that you might want to have one. If so, you're going to have an end reference, right? And that end reference, instead of pointing here, right, front points here. And I think in my case, end would point to here. I want it to be one short of that, because if I want to add at the end, then I know I'm adding between the end and the front, right? Make sense? Yeah, Ben, go ahead.
So would you recommend having an end reference even if it wasn't a circular linked list?
It depends on the number of operations I'm doing at the end.
Okay.
If I have a lot of stuff where I think I'm going to be working at the end, then yeah, why not? Doesn't cost you much, right? Doesn't
right.
cost, so might as well, sure.
Okay.
Okay. All right, does that make sense, folks? Kind of as expected, right? None of this is earth-shattering, right? So now let us turn our attention to project 4. Okay, so hopefully everybody has read that document by now, and I'm not going to read